Today I'm playing Super Hexagon, which is probably my favorite kind of arcade action game just ever. Just kind of qualifying arcade action game as like an action game that goes on endlessly, kind of like Pac-Man, Tetris, et al. And there's been a big surge of these on phone platforms, just because the format is really good for those kind of bite-sized game experiences. And I think of all of them, I really like Cannibal, I really like Ziggurat, I like just a huge chunk of them. Ask me about them sometime and I'll just yap at you for hours. But Super Hexagon is my favorite. I've probably spent like 40 hours with it or something over like 3 years. It was one of the first games I put on my iPhone when I first got a smartphone. Making a video about it was a little bit challenging because I am very used to the iPhone version and I barely touched the PC version, and it feels a little bit awkward to me just because I'm so used to the instant touch controls. Feedback is very important in this game, believe it or not. And I think after fiddling around with it for a while, the PC version is fine. I think other people will be fine and have a good time playing the PC version. I'm just very used to the iPhone version, so I thought about doing a video where I just tried to get as much big high scores as I show the biggest high score I could, but the idea of spending like 2 or 3 hours trying to make a really impressive video on the PC version just didn't sound that fun because I wasn't super used to these controls. So instead I just am doing a casual little run through of the game. I'm just beating all 6 levels, doing as fine as I can. There's no editing, just so some of the gotta love that Chip Soul soundtrack. So might not be as there you go. That's a little pathetic. Let's see how we can do on the next level. But yeah, I really love this game. I love playing it. I've played it so fucking much. It's just really something I adore. And I think what I've kind of realized is that the reason that I adore it so much is that all the things about it that, I think at its core it's just this thing where you're dodging a bunch of oncoming obstacles. And I think what makes Super Hexagon really interesting is that all the little things about it, the little wrinkles that can put other people off the game, as I've found, kind of wind around being the things that make it compelling. The things that make it kind of twisted are what make it work for me. Like, the main thing with Super Hexagon is that it's very obfuscated. Like, we got this spinning screen, the pulsing center here is also kind of distorting the screen effects, the flashing colors, which I don't know how well that speaks to how accessible the game is. I'm sorry if that is an obstacle. All of them get in the way of you parsing what's going on the screen visually. It's still pretty clear, like, what's going on, as long as you're okay with flashing colors, but it's obfuscated in a lot of key ways, and that goes down to the controls. Like, instead of just tapping left and right to move one cell at a time, there's gradient movement, where you're moving like as long as you have the mouse button held down, and that doesn't really make sense in the early on levels. Why not just tap left and right to move from cell to cell? But it makes sense later on when you're moving like now, when you're moving just a cute like 3 cells in a split second, and that takes 1 motion with the controls as they are versus 3 if you're tapping to move cells. And they play some tricks with the camera later on that are really clever. This is probably the most psychedelic the game gets color-wise. It's only when you're in the second phase of the hyper-hexagoner. But there's spinning, there's all sorts of little tricks. The game does not line up with the rhythm of the music. It's almost like an anti-rhythm game. You're just having to go against any kind of playing it. I've never found that playing it without the music makes it easier, but everything about the game is like kind of on edge. It's making you do things slightly differently than you probably want to. Oh, we've elevated to Hyper Hexagonist here. And I think that's kind of what makes it work, is that everything about it that's weird and off-putting kind of swings into this kind of being really compelling. So there's a number of other things I think about it that are really interesting, because I think this game, I love that trick with the camera where it spins. This is probably, these and Hyper Hexagonist are probably my favorite levels. This level in particular, the one I spend the most time with is Hyper Hexagonist because it's the fastest and hardest. But this one is really cool for how it messes with the camera. They don't do that again until the final level, after Hyper Hexagonist. And it's just one of my favorite little tricks that the game throws at you, is that camera pull. Because I almost never die now because of that. Here, it's probably coming up, where they spin the camera around like 360 degrees real quick. I just had to train my brain to be able to tune it out. And you can still see. You just have to tweak your brain. Everything is about getting your brain to work in this way that's not quite right. And it's just not quite right enough to be really good and right. Kind of like, that's true of a lot of treasure games, I think. But one thing that really makes this game cool, I think, is the structure. It's not a single endless arcade action game like Ziggurat or Pac-Man, where it starts at the easiest and then continues and escalates. Because that would get real boring. Because starting at you saw the very first 60 seconds of difficulty were trivial compared to this to all this nonsense. Just really trivially easy. And that's true of a lot of arcade action games. Like, they start off really trivially easy, and once you if they just keep going on as long as you can stay alive, then having a hard time with the hexagon levels today, which kind of makes sense because they're the ones I've played probably the least. The way where they change between 4 and 6 cells can really mess with you. But the level structure, the pseudo level structure of Super Hexagon is again kind of weird because they're all endless levels. So really, in a way, the hardest one is the first level, because you have to move through all of the levels basically before you can get to the last one that goes on infinitely. So why is it split up into levels? Well, you can try each level over and over and over again and practice it and learn it and figure it out. And that just enables it to get a lot harder than it would if you were just starting on hard on Hexagon every single time. I think that's kind of sort of the secret of it, is the way it lets you just practice. But it gets, if it were more representative like Ziggurat or Missile Command, then that would probably not work as well, because it would just kind of segment up the story in this ugly way. But Super Hexagon is so abstract that sort of the video gamey structure works in its favor. And it just makes it something I can play over and over and over again forever. I mostly play on Hyper Hexagonist, but because I'm trying to figure out the last level, which is the only one that goes on infinitely, because it's really hard. But yeah, real hard time with Hexagon today. It was pretty ugly. But it's that structure that kind of keeps me able to keep coming back to it, and I really appreciate that about the game. And versus something like Race the Sun is a game that and also it's just really intense basically all the time. It's as intense as you want it to be all the time, which is, I guess, bad for like most games that are supposed to have like dips and troughs in the intensity. But like Dark Souls, you're not fighting Ornstein and Smog the whole game. But with something like Race the Sun, which I play over and over and over again, but I have to start on the easiest level every time, or I can take the Warp, which takes me through another easy level, and then every time, and also between every level, every minute and a half long level, there is a 30-second interlude that has no obstacles. It gets boring. I kind of really appreciate how committed Super Hexagon is to this, just letting me play the game. I love Hexagoner. I love the song too. And I love Race the Sun, and I love Ziggurat and all that. Especially Ziggurat, just for the way, because it would not, the story, the affectingness of that story would not survive being segmented up and being super video gamey and having an HUD and all that nonsense. Which only really works in Super Hexagon because it's so abstract, which has really kind of been an obstacle to me I've had a real hard time critically just parsing out how much I fucking love this game. Because it's so formal. It's so, like, okay, up to the favorite level. Y'all get to see the ending too. It's so formal and abstract. There's no attempt at representation, and even less than, like, even Tetris kind of has more of sort of a thematic thread for me to grab onto, I think, just sort of entropy. It's hard to parse out what is resonating with me on this game on a deeper level. It's sort of, that's what I mean, it's very formal in that sense. It's something that I'm sort of just playing for the joy of playing it, and that joy isn't, I'm struggling to connect that joy with a kind of deeper resonance. But there is some kind of deeper resonance because I played for 40 hours and the game made me cry at least once when I got real far in Hyper Hexagon for the first time. But it has kind of forced me to think that to appreciate something that is that formal, that is that abstract, and doesn't really lend itself to thematic extrapolation. And it's just sort of this music video of a game that works real well and just keeps me coming back to it in a really interesting way. And it's just kind of informed a lot of my thinking about, okay, here's the last level. It's pretty demonic. Especially those up and down one, the one that killed me, because you can't really see. Oh, here's the ending. It's real pretty. It's actually just the last level theme played backwards, but then tweaked and edited to sound real good. And then it's real pretty, and it moves backwards, and it's... I appreciate this kind of... It's really just a music video for an ending, but I appreciate it more in this game than in something like Fez, where I felt kind of cheated when I got to the ending. Or The Witness, which are also very formal games in a sense, but they kind of promise more than something like Super Hexagon. And really, nothing about Super Hexagon is very unpretentious. There's very little, there's no putting on airs, pretending to be more than it is. Like, this ending is the only time it does that, and it's just a real pretty, nice ending that kind of goes back through all the levels and just helps me feel like, okay, I've had a little journey. It feels good. So, the fact that I can talk about this game so much and not really, like, hone in on a precise thing is kind of why it is kind of showing how challenging it's been for me to parse out my just complete unending adoration of this game. It's my favorite Terry Kavanagh work. Like, he made Don't Look Back, which was one of my favorite games as a kid. It was one of the first browser games that was, like, tried to tell a nice little... One of the first browser games I played that tried to tell, like, this nice little story that was resonant, and it worked quite lovely. It was quite lovely. And then he made VVVV, which I don't really like. Because this game is really just Veni Vidi Vici from VVV, only randomized and then obfuscated. Like, if you take out all the obfuscation, then it's just Veni Vidi Vici, and Veni Vidi Vici is boring. So, I love this game. Just the soundtrack here. So I think this is Kavanaugh's best work, and I'm just real happy that he got to make something that kind of captured what was compelling with stuff like VVV and kind of Don't Look Back, and just turn it into this perfect little arcade action game. I really love this game. Feel free to check it out. It's on iOS, it's on PC, it's on Android, I think. It's a great little game.